Hello everyone, I am the Magic Kirby, and welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. Commander Cube Draft is a mini-series where I'm going to be talking about everything Cube Draft, but related specifically to the Commander format. In this episode, I'll be showing you how to draft my online Commander Cube. That way it's easier to follow if you want to draft along with friends, or even with me and other members in the Discord server. If you like any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. But the very best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck techs, gifts, and more. You can also support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Although the Commander Cube I curate in real life is also found on CubeCobra, unfortunately there aren't any websites suited to faithfully bring about its true draft experience. By that, I mean cards that alter the draft per se. You can see what I mean in the video above. There, I discuss ways of making your draft experience more interesting by adding cards that affect the draft itself. However, since a lot of those cards add additional packs to the draft, can be swapped into a pack to allow for multiple picks, etc., I had to omit them from the online version of my cube. Same with a lot of cards that don't really translate well to drafting on a website and then playing online via Cockatrice. That being said, thanks to playing online, you have the benefit of having access to absolutely any card you want, including Heroes of the Realm promos, digitally exclusive cards, insanely expensive cards, etc. Alright, with that lengthy intro out of the way, let's go to CubeCobra and see how to draft my cube. We're now able to draft cubes with multiple players, so huge shout out to the CubeCobra team for getting this to work. You simply give this link to whoever you want to draft my cube with. Then they'll start appearing here. Once everyone's set, if you have any empty seats, set them to bots and then start to draft. I'm going to quickly draft to show you what to do once the draft is over. But before I start, one very important thing to keep in mind is that, since my cube is drafted like Commander Legends, all player will get either 2 copies of the Prismatic Piper or Faceless one. This is to ensure that everyone at the very least can build a 2-colored deck and not get locked out for not having a commander. But these will be added to Cockatrice later. Another thing I want to discuss before drafting are cards that matter while you're drafting that don't physically affect the draft. For example, let's say you come across these cards during the draft. Assuming you're communicating with everyone on a Discord server or some other way to talk with everyone, simply announce that you drafted Piratic Hunter and note which pick it was. There's no reason not to believe you, since everyone should be drafting that same number of pick when you do. With 20 cards per pack, drafting this after the 10th pick or so is definitely a busted card. With Pollyanna, you do something similar. Announce what you drafted. Then pick any 2 people, since you don't really know who's passing to whom, and then play out the card with them. One of them gives you a color, you choose one, and then the other player gives you the last color. Note these down for when you play it in a game. Once you have your deck, don't do anything else. Don't build it, don't add basic lands, etc. You can do all this in Cockatrice, which makes it easier. Just go here and download the deck. Then open the created file, copy all of it, then head on to Cockatrice. Load the deck from the clipboard and voila! Your draft pool is now in Cockatrice. Keep in mind that conspiracies and heroes do not take up slots in your deck, as explained in the previous episode, of which you can find a video for up above. The best way to build is to first get rid of cards that don't follow your commander's color identity, assuming you've already chose one and had it in mind while drafting. Also, if you didn't draft a commander in colors you would have preferred, now's the time to add either 2 copies of the Prismatic Piper or Faceless one to your deck. This is optional, but very useful if you drafted a background you'd rather have in your command zone, or drafted only a single legend with partner and you want to at least give it an additional color. So they're still useful even if you drafted as well as you could have. One house rule you can employ is that the Prismatic Piper also has Friends Forever for if you only drafted 1 legend with it. But this is super optional since I personally don't like house rules. The more streamlined you do things with the rules, then the easier it is to draft the cube. Back to the cards you're adding to your sideboard. Those cards are in your sideboard are just that, cards in your sideboard. That means that cards with effects that mention outside of the game are referring to this sideboard. So yes, wish effects do work in my Commander Cube as intended. You can learn more about that in this video up here. Alright, now that you got rid of the cards that can be included in your deck, as well as cards you might not want in your deck, you can have a better idea of how many and which basic lands to add to your deck. Since Emrakul the Eon's Torn is in the cube, along with other cards that care about colorless mana, you can also add wastes as if they were plains, islands, etc., since they're technically basic lands. Obviously, you're not supposed to add an indefinite amount of wastes to your draft pool like you would the 5 other basic lands, but I'll allow it. Especially since you have to be super brave and lucky to choose a colorless commander in a Commander Cube draft. Once you have that, again, make sure that your deck is 100 cards, keeping in mind that if you have conspiracies and heroes, it will definitely go over that. Just make sure that you have 100 cards if you were ignoring them, or 95 if you drafted Advantageous Proclamation. And that's it. After you've decided which 2 4-player pods your 8-person draft will be divided into, start your games. Again, keeping in mind that heroes begin on the battlefield and conspiracies begin face down in the command zone, unless stated otherwise. You're going to have to look for them, along with your commander, from within your library when the deck starts. However, before we begin playing, there are a couple of other cards I'd like to discuss in order to make your experience more streamlined. Caller of the Untamed, Arcane Savant, and Volatile Chimera all require being revealed before the start of the game. So if they're in your deck, reveal them from your library, open your sideboard, choose the pertinent cards, and then continue with the effect, exiling them. Then shuffle these cards back into your library. Another card that cares about being shown at the beginning of the game is Cryptic Spires. Before the game starts, make sure you reveal it and notify the table which 2 colors is going to tap for. This might seem like a lot of record keeping and note taking in theory, but it's not that much work in practice. Some other cards I want to discuss is how to use them while you're actually playing Cockatrice. Animate Library and Animate Graveyard are pretty intuitive, but I want to go over them a bit quickly. Since you can't attach cards to your graveyard or library on Cockatrice, just play these onto the battlefield and it should be understood that they represent your library or graveyard as a creature, respectively. Patient Zero and Nilfgaard Fury have similar abilities in that damage is not removed during the cleanup step. This can be easy to track on Cockatrice by adding circular counters on the creatures. I like to use red for detrimental effects. Simply adding these red marks to creatures dealt damage is a good way to keep track when you have this type of effect in play. Spy Eye is a bit tricky to achieve in Cockatrice as faithfully as possible in real life. If you're drawing a card from your opponent's library, no one has to see it. So when its trigger resolves, you'd have to have your opponent take the top card of their library face down, and then pass it to you while staying face down, and then you put it into your hand. Like I said, a lot of these effects are intuitive if you have an in-depth grasp at how to use Cockatrice as seen here. Richard Garfield PhD and Killer Cosplay can be a bit tricky, but fortunately you can get around their effect the same way as when playing clones. Let's say you had a clone enter the battlefield as a copy of some other card. Some players simply write the card name on the clone as a notation. Others create an indicator in card form via the token creating function and then attach that clone to the card copying, make it easier. You can do both to indicate which card is being referred to with these mental magic style effects. My only suggestion when using these is to avoid naming digitally exclusive cards with effects that are not viable in Cockatrice, such as Perpetually and Seek. Definitely avoid those. I'd say avoid effects that draft from a spellbook, but those abilities are actually viable in Cockatrice. They just require a bit more work and faith from your opponents that you aren't cheating. Pool of Vigorous Growth is similar but impossible to achieve with just Cockatrice. However, if you played MTGO, this effect is the same as the Momorvig Vanguard. Fortunately, since Momorvig Basic is a format played on Cockatrice, you can use the same tool for Pool of Vigorous Growth. Simply go to this website and have everyone in your game access it. From there, everybody can see which token you're creating via its effect. That way, no one can claim you're cheating. But more importantly, it makes using these digitally exclusive cards very possible. Good thing too because it's super fun. Tournament Protector, Tybalt the Chaotic, and Gem Bazaar are also viable thanks to Cockatrice. These cards, and all effects that have a random choice as well, can be achieved thanks to choosing the number of faces in the die. When you roll a die, you can choose a number. For Tournament Protector, you'd choose 1 to 3, same with Tybalt, where naturally the result of the roll is the ability when read in order. For Gem Bazaar, I choose a 5-sided die and have the result correspond to Woburg order. For example, rolling a 1 has it add white mana, rolling a 5 has it add green mana. What's important to keep in mind when doing this is that rolling this die is simply to simulate randomness. This will not interact with actual die rolling abilities. Some other effects in the cube are viable when playing thanks to the token creating function of Cockatrice. For example, Gunk Slug and Bone Rattler create token cards. These are cards that don't disappear when changing zones, like leaving the battlefield. However, they're considered tokens and can be populated, etc. This means that when you create these tokens, make sure you uncheck the box that has the token disappear when leaving the battlefield. As for the Gunk tokens, just pass them to opponents, have them shuffle them into their library, and that's it. Since Bone Rattler creates token card copies of a card that actually exists, it's almost like Arena's Conjure and Double Team mechanics. Which brings me to all of the cards with these mechanics that are in my queue. There are a ton of them, but they behave in the same way as the previously mentioned Gunk Slug and Bone Rattler. For any card you conjure or duplicate via Double Team, just create it like a token that does not disappear and put it where it goes. If it's conjured to the battlefield, leave it there. If it's conjured to any other zone, just put it where it goes and that's it. Clear of the Loon Joy Sculptor, which makes your tokens not disappear, would have the same process done. This time, whenever you create any token after Claire has entered the battlefield, just make sure you uncheck the box when creating it. That way the tokens don't disappear when leaving zones, just like she wants. The token creating function is also useful when achieving status effects like the Initiative, Monarch, and City's Blessing. However, it can also be used when venturing through dungeons, a mechanic heavily supported in my cube. Just create the dungeon like a token and make a notation of which room you're in when venturing through, and that's it. It's also useful with cards like Seek Bolus's Counsel. If you manage to get the mode that says Planeswalk to Pools of It Coming, simply make a token that won't disappear, and that's it. Leave it on whoever battlefield and keep in mind that you're all now at this point. While this video is meant to be helpful, when playing with the online version of my Commander Cube, it should be noted that I am constantly updating my cubes. However, hopefully the tricks I've showed you for Cockatrice are helpful to get your bearings with certain mechanics and actions that are actually viable in Cockatrice, and thus make for fun times playing with cards you wouldn't normally be able to play with. If in the future you see some cards in my cube that you have questions on, just ask me in my Discord server in the Commander Cube channel, or you can leave a comment down below. If you haven't already and want to take a gander at the current version of my Commander Cubes, you can find links to them in the description, where you can see both the online version of my cube as well as the one I curate in real life. I have some more topics to cover in great detail and depth for this mini-series, so stay tuned. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I also want to thank everyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of Commander Cube Draft on the Commander Tavern. I am the Darren Kirby, and happy drafting.